Hey, good afternoon, Real Life Newport. It is great to have you join us. This is our Monday afternoon Q&A, and I'm very happy to announce that we had some cues for our Q&A. So I want to thank you for joining us today, and I've got Luke with me again. He's volunteered to come in and be the punching boy for some of the hard questions.
I'm just here because I'm self-employed and available.
I'm going to throw you the hard ones today. And so anyways, I'm going to get this pulled up here on my tablet here so I can see as you log in. If you want to say hello, I will hopefully be able to see that, and you can join us. So let's see, am I live on my tablet? I hope so. If not, I'm going to have to go to my phone. But it'll be my phone today. Set off and go live here. Okay. So went through our sermon on Hebrews chapter 1, verses 4 through 14. Mm-hmm. And the content of the sermon largely revolved around angels. What stood out to you in that sermon?
The thought that I remember the most was the fact that the Hebrew church there had no real idea how to understand or place Jesus, but they had a long time reverence and understanding of angels, and that was almost a tool that the author used to show them where Jesus was above them by first going back to where the angels were and what power and authority they had, and then so it would kind of give them a proper place for Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. The angels held a very, very high position of honor and esteem to the Jewish people, even to the point, and we're going to build this into our next sermon, that the Jewish people saw that they believed that the law came through angels in the Old Testament. And so God's giving of the law by some way, shape, or form was utilized. Angels were utilized in the process of Moses getting the law from God. So the way they viewed the law was a very high. They saw the angels as worthy of carrying the law. Mm-hmm. And so in that was a very, very high standard. So for them to look at angels, that was high. To say that Jesus was above the angels was just an astronomical statement to the greatness of Jesus. That's a great point. Rhonda, good to see you. Ron, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. This is going to be about maybe 15 minutes. We got a couple good questions that we're going to attack today. So, what stood out to me the most, and I didn't really highlight this in the sermon yesterday, so if you missed this, you could go online, but this will supplement the sermon. I have my reading glasses today, so I can actually read, but the verse in 10, it says, Lord, you laid the foundations of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you will remain. They will all wear out like a garment. You will roll them up like a robe. Like a garment, they will be changed. But you will remain the same, and your years will never end. And just this idea that in Jesus came the creation of the world, and in Jesus will come the end of the world. Like this is his creation from beginning to end. And we get so caught up in all of this stuff in the world that is not going to be here, that's going to change. And these are things that are going to distract us and draw us aside, and that Jesus is where all of it resides. If you want the unchanging, all you have is Jesus. There's no other option. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things that really stood out to me. So, anything else that you can think of?
Not on that part.
All right. Well, we did have two questions. As you know, our sermon was on angels yesterday, and I was greatly hoping we would have some questions about angels, and we did get some. So, our whole sermon wasn't about what are angels and preaching about angels. As you go through Hebrews 1, you see that angels are an important part of that discussion. But the entire point of the sermon was that Jesus is superior to the angels. That being said, the world does present a lot of teachings about what angels are. And we talked about some of those. There's guardian angels. There are Clarence from It's a Wonderful Life angels. There's fat baby angels. And I've always called them fat baby angels. I didn't realize that was funny until people were laughing at my phrasing of fat baby angels.
I think it would have been funny if Jared would have came out wearing some angel wings.
I'm not that fat, but close. Anyway, yeah, that would have been banned on YouTube, I'm sure. That being said, a couple of questions on angels. The first one, in Hebrews 1:14, so I'm going to read this. It asks, well, here's what the verse says. It says, ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation. So the question that was asked is, it says here, are not all angels ministering spirits? And the question is, does that mean all angels or just the angels in heaven? Does that include fallen angels that we talked about yesterday that would be also demons? And so I had never thought of that question, never heard that question, so I did some digging on that today. I think it's a fantastic question because you're digging into the scriptures and wrapping yourself up, just trying to grasp this. And that's really what I want, is us to be immersed in the scriptures and to strive to understand it. So I think that's a great question. So as I was looking at the Greek language of this verse, there is one word in the Greek language that is very obviously missing as you go through this in verse 14, and that is the word angel. Literally in the Greek language, that verse says, eisen, auki, pantes, liturgica, pneumata, which literally means are not all ministering or serving spirits. So where then does the language, are not all angels ministering spirits, where does the word angels show up in this verse? And to understand this, we have to realize that this is a continuation of verse 13. And we have to have this idea of context, because to know what 14 is talking about, we have to look at 13. And it says that in talking about angels, it says, to which of the angels did God ever say? So in that verse, and then looking at the rest of the context of the verse, what we see here is God, or is the author of Hebrews taking angels that are in the presence of God, that are held in such high esteem by the Jewish people, that were seen doing numerous things through the Old Testament, representing God here on earth in some manner. You've got the angels, and these are the angels that are in the presence of God, not the fallen angels, but that's what's being compared all the way through. So in verse 13, it says, to which of the angels did God ever say, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet? So he's saying he never said that to the angels, but to those angels, they are all ministering spirits. So what we have here is, I am using the NIV. The NIV, rather than using a pronoun of they, speaking of angels, it uses the word angels. And just for your reading and viewing pleasure, I got my NASB of this verse. And it literally says here, are they not all ministering spirits? Speaking about the angels that were referenced in verse 13. So this opens up the question, are there better translations than others? And should the NIV have added the word angels in there? And I'm going to say yes and no. There's some good and some bad. So in the translation, does it have the word angels in it? In the original language, no, but it has got the implied pronoun from the previous verse. So rather than using the pronoun, the interpreters or the translators of the NIV just put the word angels instead of the word they. Now some translations use the word they, which are more accurate to the original text. It's a little bit of both, and there certainly doesn't appear to be any nefarious intent in that, but that's where that sits. So it looks like Anthony Perez is watching, Cheryl Griffin Friesen is watching, hey Cheryl, and Carrie Davis from way up in Priest Lake. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. So in that first question, is it talking about all angels or just fallen angels? I think looking at the context, looking at the Greek language, we can conclude fairly confidently that this is talking about the angels that are being referenced in the rest of this chapter, that are in the presence of God.
Yeah.
So,
and wouldn't you say that verse is not meant to be about what the angel's job is. It's comparing them to Jesus still. It's saying what their job is. It's saying, to Jesus, he said, sit at my right hand.
Yes.
But the angels are all out doing their job.
Yeah, and they are servants.
Yeah.
While there is an authoritative or superiority to Jesus Christ. So once again, I think you're right that it is showing that delineation between who Jesus is and what the role of angels are beneath who Jesus is. So that's a good point. So the second question had to do with guardian angels. So one of the things that we brought up yesterday is the world presents angels kind of in this picture sometimes as a guardian angel, and the idea that everyone has a guardian angel kind of watching over their shoulders, protecting us. Luke is going to address this idea. Is guardian angels a biblical concept? Is it not a biblical concept? And where can we put our feet down on that? So
I'll start with the question, which I think came from my mom, about...
you said you weren't going to throw her out there.
I wasn't going. You said to say hi, Mom, and I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, okay.
Now it's too late. So Matthew 18, which the question came from, 18:10, and it says, "See that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I say to you that their angels in heaven continually see the face of my Father who is in heaven." And so, basically almost all of the thoughts and teaching about guardian angels come from that verse. It's one of the few verses that directly ties angels to a person. And it's kind of hard to make a case for it just based on that verse. Because if you just take that verse at face value, it might just be only little kids have a guardian angel. Like there's no clear picture. And we have a couple other scriptures about angels who kind of have that protective way. And the first one is Genesis 48:15 through, and I'll get that one, 48:15 through 16. And it says, "He blessed Joseph and said, 'The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and may my name live on in them, and the names of my fathers and Abraham and Isaac, and may they grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth.'" So really clearly, he's talking about an angel who protected him from evil.
Yeah, so that's Joseph blessing his sons, identifying that, in the wild story of Joseph, the ups and the downs, he identifies that he had an angel watching over him at some point there. In Psalm 34, verse 7, it says, "The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them," pointing to the idea that there is a role of angels to protect his people and guard and protect. So that's in Psalm 34.
And then we have the Acts, missed my spot, Acts 12, 11 and 15. And I'll just read through 11 to 15. And it says, "When Peter came to himself, he said, 'Now I know for sure the Lord has sent forth his angel and rescued me from the hand of Herod and from all that the Jewish people were expecting.' And when he realized this, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, who was called Mark, where many were gathered together, and they were praying. When he knocked at the door of the gate, a servant girl named Rhoda came to answer. When she recognized Peter's voice, because of her joy, she did not open the gate, but ran and announced that Peter was standing in front of the gate. They said to her, 'You are out of your mind,' but she kept insisting that it was so. They kept saying, 'It is his angel.'" And I think it's pretty protective kind of duty or role, but it's they're not always possessive of a person, right?
And the verse that we just read, it says, "Are not all angels ministering or serving spirits?" There is a role of angels on behalf of God to serve us.
Yeah.
And that might be in a protective measure, that might be in another measure, but God does have angels. He has used them.
Yeah.
He will use them, and I believe he does use them.
And he doesn't make it super clear anywhere in those passages that we all have a personal angel or that we all don't have.
Mm-hmm.
Like clearly sometimes we do.
Yeah. So can we say that there are guardian angels? Maybe, maybe not. I don't think that Scripture teaches overwhelmingly with clarity on that topic. I know that God does use his angels to serve us and at times to protect us. That doesn't mean, at least I don't believe that means that angels protect us from all harm, but they are the spiritual element in this physical world from time to time to, I believe, ensure God's will being accomplished. Sorry, my phone ringer's on and my daughter is calling.
Yeah.
She's gonna have to wait.
And another thing we were talking about earlier that's kind of hard for us to wrap our minds around it is an angel might protect us from evil that gets in the way of God's plan, but there might be some evil that God's going to use for our good, and he might not keep us from that.
Sure.
Like mentioned someone dying in a car accident or something bad thing happening to us. Just because that happens doesn't mean that they're not watching out over us.
Your guardian angel took the day off or was in the bathroom and something bad happened, that's not really what the teaching here is about. So God protects us. The angels help facilitate his will here in the world. And I think that rather than looking at our circumstances, we look at God and what he wants to accomplish. And that takes the primary element of what role the angels play in our lives. So I'm not saying there aren't guardian angels. I'm not saying that there are guardian angels as we see them in the world. What I am saying is the Bible does not give us a conclusive answer on that.
It definitely says there are angels who have the role of guardian, but but it definitely doesn't say that every single person has one.
Yes. Yep. Very good. So we've had Terry Butler and Michael and Cindy Golden are watching. Good to see you guys. Thanks for joining us. One last tell you, I think this question is absolutely fascinating. And this has nothing to do with angels, but I want to read it because one of the things that I love is to take the scriptures and interrogate the scriptures. And what I mean by that is ask every question you can think of about this passage so that you can gain an understanding. And sometimes you come across questions that are you just don't know how to wrap your head around. And this question, I'll tell you, threw me for a little bit of a loop. I had to throw some studying on it. And I certainly see the value of this question because it's something that is taught in Scripture. More than that, we sing this in a song. And so it's in 2 Corinthians 5, verse 21. It says, God made him, speaking about Jesus, so God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. The question that was asked is, how did Jesus become sin? How does a person become a thing? I understand he became our sin bearer and he took our sins upon himself, but what do you mean when Jesus became sin? I think that's a great question. I think that is a very important question because this goes right to the source, right to the root of our salvation. And so I want to just kind of walk through how I would process this question. So I would start by asking the question, is the word sin a noun or a verb? Now, the Bible uses it in both tenses. So if I'm saying it is a verb, you could put the word to in front of it. So to sin. So is it possible for me to sin? It is. Is it possible for you to sin? Can you go and do something that would be sinful? Yes. So to sin is a verb, and that is an active thing. Now, to understand what sin is, it's this Greek word hamarta or hamartien in the usage that it is here in 2 Corinthians. Oh, and if I didn't give that, the verse is in 2 Corinthians 5:21. 2 Corinthians 5:21, it is used here as a noun, not as a verb. But digging into this myself, going a little bit deeper, there are a number of senses of the word sin. Sin is this word hamarta, like I said, and it literally means missing the mark. And to understand what it means to miss the mark, we have to know what the mark is. And if we're out shooting guns, and if I miss the mark, you have to know what I'm shooting at. Are we target shooting?
Yeah.
Are we hunting? Are we, what is the objective here?
Yes.
And if I hit a deer, but I'm shooting at a target, I missed the mark by hitting a different mark, or, that's probably something I would do. But anyways, the mark, missing the mark is, if I were to put it in one phrase, it is the perfect holiness of God. God calls us to be holy as he is holy. And living in holiness, or the perfection, or the set-apartness of God is what he calls us to. And in Romans it says that we have all sinned, verb, and fallen short of the glory of God. All of us have committed the act of sin, missing the mark of God's holiness. And by default, we are not holy. That is just part of what it means to have sin in this world.
And isn't it pretty clear that Jesus didn't do that?
Yes.
Like, even the prophecies about him said he would be spotless and blameless.
Absolutely, yes.
So he can't be that. He can't be that sinful.
Yes. And so,
Can't be a
Jesus
sinful
never
person.
committed the verb act of sinning. But to get into the noun, and there are three primary senses to the word sin in the New Testament. There are actually others, but they're referenced only very, very in small ways. But the first one is sin as an act, and that's a verb, and that's what we were just talking about. Second is sin as guilt. So sin, using the word sin, has a connotation attached to it of guilt. And we see that oftentimes with the discussion of forgiveness of sin. So when Jesus at the Last Supper, he said, this is my blood that is poured out. This is the new covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sin. This idea of the forgiveness of not the verb sin, but the noun, the act, or the being of sin, or the state of guilt. So it's the guilt and the consequence that comes alongside of sin. So it's not the verb, but now we're talking about this sense of guilt. When John the Baptist was baptizing before the ministry, preparing the way for Jesus, what we see is he was baptizing for the forgiveness of sin, getting people to repent. And they were guilty, and the sin is associated with guilt, and it carries the same name in those contexts. So that's actually used a number of times in the scriptures. The third, and I find this to be interesting because this is important to our discussion in 2 Corinthians, is the personification of sin. Now, when I say personification, we're going to read a couple of verses here out of Romans, and this is something that I guess I'd never really wrapped my head around until this question was asked, so I'm grateful to the person who asked it. I'm going to start in Romans chapter 6, about verse 20, and it says, when you were slaves, you were free from the control of righteousness. What benefit did you reap at that time from the things that you are now ashamed of? Those things result in death. But now that you have been slaves to God, the benefit you reap leads to holiness, and the result is eternal life. So sin now has this personification. It's not about guilt. It's not about the act of sin. Rather, what it's saying is we can be a slave to sin, like it is a person and a master that rules over us. And that idea carries on into verse 7. It says, what shall we, go in verse 9. Once I was alive apart from the law, but when the commandment came, sin gave life, and I died. I found out that the very commandment that was intended to bring life actually brought death. For sin afforded by the commandment deceived me, and through the commandment put me to death. So then the law is holy, and the commandment is holy, righteous, and good. And what it says there is sin sprang to life, and sin has this personification. And when Paul talks about this in Romans, what I want you to think about for sin is this: it is the act of sin, the guilt of sin, the consequences of sin, the controlling nature of sin in our lives. If you were to roll all of that into this personification of sin, that's what it's talking about. How sin personified and the consequences and all of the stuff that comes with it is something that impacts our lives and has come alive of sorts. And so when we get over here again to 2 Corinthians, I want to ask the question, is this the verb, the act of sinning? Secondly, is it the guilt associated with sin, or is it the personification of sin? So let's go back to this in 2 Corinthians 5:21. God made him who had no sin. Stop right there. So Jesus, who had no sin, that is likely the guilt of sin. This isn't the personification of sin, but he didn't possess sin. He had never committed sin, so the guilt of sin was never on him. But the rest of this sentence plays this out. He made him who had no sin to become sin for us. He becomes that personification of sin that he's talking about in Romans. Sin becomes a person. And then it continues here, and it becomes sin for us so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. So we take on righteousness as a personification as well. So sin becomes a person, and we become righteousness, which would be the opposite of sin, and righteousness becomes personified as well. But the righteousness personified initially would have been Jesus. But he became sin personified, so I could be righteousness personified. And the sin personified was Jesus, and he went to the cross as sin personified and died and paid the penalty and completely and totally put to death sin, its mastery, its consequences for us eternally, all of that at the cross. And I can have his righteousness, and I am the personified righteousness of Jesus, and he is the personification of my sin. So as we look at 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21, understanding it in those terms is what helped me really wrap my head around what this verse was saying. I really think it was a great question. Is there anything that you had in there?
Not too much. The personification thing, I think an easy way for me to understand it was the passages about putting to death the old man. Like that's the personification of sin. Sure,
yeah. When he's talking about, hey, put off the old self, put on the new self, put on the new man. It's all of this. It's either righteousness or sin personified. It is in an act or in a being. And it's interesting how Paul in the scriptures uses that. So anyway, for you guys that are still joining us today, Luke, as you see today, has graced us with his haircut, and his wife was kind enough to say, you don't look right with a hat on. And I agree. So much better to see your face and not the bill of a hat.
Hide behind the hat.
Yeah. So anyways, so I appreciate you, Luke, coming in today. I appreciate you guys for joining us, all of you that jumped in. And again, if you do have any questions on this or questions on these explanations, please put something in the comments. I've really enjoyed doing these because, to me, part of living a holy and righteous life, part of growing closer to Jesus is understanding what he said in the context of what he said. And discussion is going to be how we get there. And being in relationship with one another, but also challenging each other through the word. And being able to wrap our heads around and have good understanding of his scriptures helps us as we take our steps closer to knowing Jesus and hearing his voice. And as we saw, his voice is superior to all other voices, so we need to hear that and align ourselves with it. So I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you, Luke. And we will see you again next week.